Hi there. My name is Luke. I will be talking to you today about LISTO and what LISTO means for Patron Perfectionists, but not just Patron Perfectionists, but also drinks culture at large, the bartenders that we work with every day, right? It's what it means to me. There's going to be a bit of a personal message here as well. I'm very connected to this area of cocktails and this area of bartending. Um, this is really about the experience that people have with your drinks, the have with your particular style of hospitality. And I'm all about hospitality. I'm all about having these amazing experiences in bars and in restaurants and all around the world. And a lot of these are driven by you, by creative bartenders that do these amazing things every day and take a lot of passion and love to do. What is Lister? What is Patron Perfectionist? How does it fit in together? We have had years of these competitions stacking on top of each other, and every year they have developed more and more and more. The evolution of Patron Perfections has been amazing. It's a big part of why we show all of the previous finalist drinks on the Patron Perfections website. It's an amazing resource, and you can look at how the styles of drinks have changed over the years, how presentation has changed, how stories behind those drinks have changed as well, right? It's about a community growing together, developing, becoming more innovative, more interesting, more creative at the end of the day. Creativity is a big part of bars and bartending and drinks culture. I've been to many bars around the world where I don't remember what the drinks I had there were. This was years ago. But I remember the experiences I had. I remember the memories that I left that bar with. And I remember these important moments of my entire view of cocktail culture changing completely just because of how something was presented to me, the theatrics and the ideas behind these drinks. A little bit about me, first of all, before we get into it. So, my name is Luke Knox. I am the Bacardi Trade Ambassador for KwaZulu-Natal here in South Africa. I've been in the hospitality industry for 14 years, so a fair bit. Very humble beginnings, but at one point during that journey, I found myself in bars and I kind of fell in love with the culture of bars and bartending. I I dropped out of university to pursue a career as a bartender, which is not normally a recommended thing, but it worked out pretty well for me. I have a huge amount of passion for this industry and for the people in it. I've always been one for educating and uplifting bartenders in the industry around me. I've always thought, the all ships rise with the same tide. As much as we can educate other bartenders around us in the industry grows as a whole, and it's better for us. Which actually has put me in a perfect position with Bacardi and right here today to spread this knowledge and spread this education and teach people about these amazing areas that we can develop as bartenders and as storytellers through our drinks. Please follow me on Instagram if you have some time. I'm always happy to connect with bartenders. But beyond that, let's get into the session. So, when we're talking about Listo, there's many aspects to it. The most obvious one is your garnish, right? Um, a final flourish is a great way of putting it. It is your way of expressing what this drink is trying to tell you. There are many ways to do that. And we're going to be covering different areas and different styles. Some of them you might know already, you might be very familiar with. Some of them you might not. So, we're talking about theatre, serviceware, techniques, and the senses. The senses is probably one of the most important ones. Before we get into it, into the good meaty parts of the presentation, I do have to thank two very important people. Harrison Kennedy was the winner of Patron Perfectionist Global Finals. He is a very inspirational bartender from Sydney, Australia, and he has this approach to bartending and drinks where he really adds a personal element of himself to his drinking culture and the people around him and the customers that enjoy his beverages. There's quite a bit of humor and a piece of himself almost that fits into those drinks and tells the story very effectively. Then we have Lawrence Gabriel, Lawrence Gabriel, same competition as Harrison Kennedy, pulled in just behind him at second. Very inspirational bartender from the Philippines. Inspired us so much, in fact, that he now works for Bacardi as a trade ambassador in the Philippines. And we brought him into the fold because he loves exploring the world of drinks and then telling stories and discoveries through that exploration through those drinks themselves. So, two very, very cool people. I encourage you to look them up online. Inspirational bartenders that are making big waves and big moves in the industry. Now, into the idea of the history of tableside theater, right? It's not something that's very new. It's actually very, very old. I'm not going to get too into the meaty bits of all of these different events, right? You can read through these as much as you like, but it shows that there is a history of flourishing and embellishment when it comes to not just drinks but also food. It's been a part of cuisine and food culture for a very long time. Chefs are not just trying to make delicious meals, but they're trying to tell a story through them and express them and portray them in a very particular way. Sometimes they're comedy, as with the helmeted cock. Sometimes it's more about the science behind a meal, the science behind how it's put together, the aromas, the sounds, the visuals, right? So there's different aspects and different avenues that we can go down, but there's a long history of this style of creating a theater through cuisine and through drinks and through meals. What's also very important to note is that it not always has to do with the meal itself. It doesn't have to be on the plate. A lot of these various expressions of tableside theatre have to do with how is it prepared and the environment that you're in. Right? The environment you're in plays a big part in flavor and experience. If we look at some examples of changing the decor, music of an entire restaurant or dining area to suit one particular meal or one particular celebration. We look at a culture of large scale feasts that were quite popular way back in the day. And a big part of that was music and singing and celebration. We look at some of the more modern methods of this. If you go back only a few hundred years, you start to look at flambeing, a tableside experience that it could very well be done in the kitchen out of everyone's eyes and still have the same effect on the flavor. But doing it in person adds a certain element of wow to that experience, to that meal, and it changes people's perception of that meal. And we can apply this to drinks as well. So, breaking down into the more of those 4 points, the senses, this is a very important part of garnishing and of Listo for me. This is where we can really engineer flavors, aromas, and various other elements to work in our favor and to deliver ingredients and flavors the way we want to the people that are drinking our drinks. Right? The first of these senses is sight. I think the saying "you eat with your eyes" has always been a thing. It's useless having a delicious cocktail that doesn't look appealing or appetizing. We're trying to not only make someone want to drink our drink, but also we want them to get a certain idea of what that drink's going to be when they look at it. Right? A good example of this, if we look at this texture, it's a lot easier when we have the names put out there: soft, hard, sparkly, shard, rough, textured. But those different types of font deliver those ideas at the same time. Soft is it almost looks very squishy. It looks like you could squeeze it like a marshmallow. But sharp, rough, these look like they have a bit of texture to them. It looks like you don't want to touch them, right? They're not as welcoming. These aren't necessarily a bad thing, but it's how are you trying to deliver these ideas? A good example of that is how there's been a big trend with gin and tonics in large, round cocoa glasses. And there's this idea of round shapes being softer and more welcoming. People being happier to drink these drinks out of these large, circular, spherical glassware. If we look at a history of glassware, most of them are round, right? When we start to think of circular glasses, we're thinking of very soft, welcoming ideas. Take that same drink, put it in a triangular glass. I know it's a little strange, but put it in a triangular glass, it looks very different, right? Where do I sip it from? Am I sipping it from a corner or from the sides? It's a little bit more difficult to drink out of. It's not as welcoming, and it almost seems a bit harsher or more bitter. This is an idea that we almost subconsciously do and don't even think about. Now that we're aware of it, we can say, okay, how am I going to take advantage of these? How am I going to be aware of this and use it to my advantage and make this work for my drink and make this work for my story? Do I want my drink to be a little bit more abrasive? Do I want it to be sharper? Do I want it to be textured? Do I want the glass to be frosted? Do I want to put it in a glass at all? Do I want to put it in a different kind of vessel that portrays a different one of these ideas? Right? How am I presenting it? Am I presenting it just in a glass, or am I presenting something else around it? I've seen plenty of creative serves. I've seen people serve drinks in terrariums or small bowls with little bonsai trees. I've seen some drinks served with the garnish around them and not even on top of the glass or in the drink. I've seen drinks served with aromatic garnishes and served in different ways. So these are all taking advantage of some of these different ideas, right? Even looking away from the vessel, what are you introducing to somebody before they even look at the vessel that's giving them an idea of one of these different textures or thoughts or even other visual indicators? Is it something to do with incense, or is it light, or is it music, right? How are we building this idea of what this drink is going to be? And this can be very, very simple, like a simple zest on top of a cocktail, or it can be something very intricate and very well put together. This is up to you. This is up to your creativity. And this is not something that's new. This has been done, again, for a very, very long time. And there's lots of resources to look at of people that have built these stories, not just around drinks, but around meals. And we can leverage those to make our drinking experience better for the people enjoying our cocktails. This is a really great example of something that is very interesting, probably a little difficult to pull off, but when it's in the glass, when it's presented to somebody, it's a big wow factor. Now, already, this is not a drink that you can put at the service bar and someone pours for themselves at a table. So already there's an element of you need to serve this at the table to somebody, right? Now, obviously, very interesting idea. It's this visual appeal, this theater of pouring a liquid out into a glass and watching it freeze in front of the customer. Um, this is done through super chilling it to a certain temperature in a very controlled environment, being very, very careful with that vessel. I don't know if you guys have ever seen this before, but very similar thing happens. For instance, a bit of a similar story. I've had it with bottles of beer, where you leave a beer in a freezer for too long, thinking, oh, I'll leave it there for a couple hours and I'll take it out and I'll drink it. And you forget it the next day, you take it out and you look, oh, it's still liquid. And you crack it open and immediately it freezes. So a bartender took this concept and thought, how can I turn this into an interesting serve for my drink? And found a way to have a frozen martini, a super cool martini, we could say. And through this has taken a simple drink that pretty much every other bar in the world could make and made it in a different way and portrayed it in a different way and showed it off in a different way to capture the appeal of the customer and to give them an experience of it before they even taste it. That's what Listo has the opportunity to do, is build that experience for our customers before they even take a sip of the drink. Smell is a beautiful part of Listo. It's a beautiful part of drinks, of food, of flavor. A big part of flavor is aromatics, it's smell. I think we all know when we have a cold and we try and have a nice meal or have a great cocktail, suddenly we can't taste most of it. right? There's old stories of very bitter medicine, and you block your nose before you swallow it, so that you're not experiencing that very acidic, bitter flavor. So smell is a great leverage for us to make our drinks better. This is a great example of this. I'm sure some have noticed this style of serving an aromatic with a dish before. There was obviously a dessert many, many years ago that had sort of a sugar bubble filled with this appley aroma, and you would pop the apple, smell the aroma, eat the sugar, eat the dessert. Uh, Very similar take on it with a drink, and again with this idea of an aromatic being served with it. Difference being there was a little bit of a journey with this. The air inside would initially be lighter than air, and this sort of balloon would slowly lift up, and as the air inside started to get a little bit denser, it would slowly drift down onto the cocktail, and then you would pop it, experience the aroma, and then sip the drink. Now there is a culture being done around the drink first. There is this action, there's this almost ritual happening around this drink, this theater. Before you even sip the drink, you have to experience this unique, interesting serve and smell these aromas and then drink the drink and experience that for all it is. I'm going to move my camera here so you can see. So the drink is called Above and Beyond. It's served at the Artesian in London. If you want to have a little bit more research and look at it a little bit more, I encourage you. Great bar, great serve, very interesting way of going about it. This is maybe one of the more intricate, more difficult ways to do these serves, but it's not impossible. And there's other ways that we can leverage these ideas and other ways that we can go about these. Sound. Now, I mentioned earlier the area you're in, the environment, and the music, the sound that you're experiencing, that plays a big part on the senses as well. When we think of enjoying a beverage or a meal, the mood that you're in, the thoughts going through your head, a lot of these things play an impact. Again, like I said right at the beginning of the session, a lot of the drinks that I've experienced in these amazing bars and these amazing experiences I've had, I don't necessarily remember how the drink tasted, but I remember the environment I was in. I remember the stories that were told to me. I remember how I felt. And sound plays a part in that as well. And this is how we attach good memories to these drinks and good memories to these flavors, is putting together this whole orchestra of sound and smell and sight, etc., with the senses. So this isn't something that you can sort of push to the side and ignore. It's a useful tool. And all of these are tools. You can use them or you can leave them alone, but using them helps us build your drink and helps us build the story, this theater, this idea of what we're trying to do together. Another great example, very similar to how we saw earlier, but instead of looking at textures, we are opening up a little bit more, right? We're starting to see how textures and sounds can fit together, right? Some of these are very much loud, but have very different styles. Some are explosive, some are abrasive, some might not be. Some might be, a little more softer on the ears, while still being loud and still being dominant. It's about the message that we're getting across, and we see this with music very often. If you're looking at pop versus rock versus metal versus rap, all of these different mediums of music are there to tell a story. They're just doing it in different ways, right? How can we take that idea, manipulate it, turn it into something that'll work for us for our drinks, right? There's no reason we can't do the same thing that musicians do. We are artists in our own form. We are creatives in our own way. How can we make use of every single tool, every single thing we have at our disposal to make it better? So, This is another really great example. This is Sound of the Sea, a meal that was served at the Fat Duck in England. I know we've been talking about drinks, but it's great to bring in food as well. And what was really interesting is with the serve, in one of the shells that they used for the plating, for the garnishing, there was actually a small music player that would play the sounds of the sea, right? Waves crashing, seagulls chirping, right? The crunching of sand under your feet. And this was a audio experience that pulled everything together for the meal, right? So we have aroma, we have visual, but we have audio as well playing a part of it. And it's there to transport people to the ocean, right? And that's what we should be doing with our drinks is transporting people to another place. It can be a real place, it can be an imaginary place, but that's what we're trying to do. Cocktails are a portal to this new world and these new experiences. And this is just another way we can do that. It's another weapon in our arsenal to deliver these ideas and to transport people to these places and give them these experiences. And that's what's really special about Listo. Touch, this is, for me, a very cool part of it. I love texture, not just when it comes to spirits, but when it comes to everything that works around cocktails. Um, just before we even continue on this, one thing that I really love about Patron is the bottles. The fact that they're handmade, you can feel the little ripples, the little textures on the bottle. And for me, that's sort of telling the story of the guys that hand make those bottles, right? It's a little experience I almost share personally with the bottles before I open them up and before I pour them. I have my own little personal tradition of feeling the ripples on the edges of the bottles and thinking about the men and women that work in the production line and make those bottles by hand. So touch is a very important thing for me. It's a thing that's very close to my heart. It's a way of telling stories and a way of remembering what people have done and how they put these things together. But it also plays a big part in the experience of drinking our cocktails for the people that are enjoying them, right? And touch extends to more than just texture. It's temperature, it's all sorts of things, right? And we've got great examples of them here. You've got fur, you've got skin, you've got rock, you've got ice. And when we think about texture, right, we subconsciously react to that as well. Think of when you have a glass in your hand and you're looking at the frosting of the glass and the cold texture of the drink, and you see the ice bubbling up at the surface. Maybe there's a bit of foam in there in the drink, and we're looking at all that texture, and we bring the drink close to our mouth, and your mouth almost waters a little bit because subconsciously you're perceiving all these things, and you get an idea of all those textures, and you know what's going to happen, and you start to salivate. Think of that same thing, but you're trying to lick a brick, right? I know it's a weird idea. I sound a little crazy right now, but when we look at a brick, it's dry, it's rough, it's abrasive, it's not appetizing at all. So if you bring a brick close to your mouth is almost going to dry up a little bit because subconsciously you're like, I don't want to taste this. This isn't going to be nice. I'm not going to enjoy this, right? This is an example of how we can perceive touch in different ways. As soon as I touch that brick, as soon as I grab it, I can feel that rough texture. I can feel the dirt on it. I can feel it's dry, hard, and horrible, and it's not something for me to taste. And so I subconsciously react to it. My body even reacts to it, right? People that drink your drinks are going to respond the same way when they pick up your drink. When they pick up your drink, the way they're feeling it, right? The feelings that they're getting in their hands and the way they're perceiving the pictures, even through other means like sight and sound, they're going to react to it, right? How people can react to textures in other ways is if you get fresh bread and you squeeze it and you hear that cracking, right? You can feel it cracking and you hear that audio, but you can feel the texture of crispy, fresh bread, and it's very pleasant. If you squeeze it and it's very stale and it squishes, suddenly not so much, right? So we find one more appealing than the other. So how can we attach this to drinks, right? Your lips are super sensitive, incredibly so, right? They are probably one of the softest, most reactive parts of your body, and there is a reason why we do certain things with drinks. Like I said, stimulating that idea of taste and simulating that delivery of your lips and your mouth to whatever you're tasting or drinking is going to have a subconscious reaction. It's going to, as much as it sounds a little bit, encourage saliva production, right? So, what part of the drink are we delivering to our mouths? We can see this in very simple ways. Are we using a straw or are we sipping directly from the drink? This is a big reason why a coupe exists, or a Nicanora glass, or a martini glass. If you put a straw in there, you're going to look a little bit silly. And the reason we want to sip directly from those glasses is because we want to deliver the texture and the ideas of those drinks. Think of a martini, silky, smooth, very luxurious, right? We don't think of it as sharp or abrasive. We think of it as long, delicate, elegant feeling. If we look at, say a shaken cocktail that we serve you in a coupe, maybe we want this frothy, fluffy, airy texture. We want that very aromatic vibe, and we want, say, if we have a little bit of foam in there, say it's like a sours or something along those lines, we want that puffy, sort of airy texture of the foam to hit those lips, and we want that experience to be delivered as well. Touch is a big impact, not just with drinks, but with food and every other part of our lives. Think of when we are babies, when we're infants. What's the first thing we do? We want to grab everything we can and experience the touch, and then we want to put it to our mouths and see what it tastes like, right? And this doesn't change, right? As we grow up into adults, we're just maybe a little bit more polite to how we go about this. But these are really great ways that we can experience things and feel textures and get an idea of how we enjoy different things, right? And that's very important for us. These are two really great serves, right? I love the first one. I know we shouldn't be biased, but I really love the first drink, Primordial. It's served at Sips Drinkery House in Barcelona. And the idea of these two metallic hands, first of all, the first thing you're going to think of is the feel of the vessel on your lips, right? It's a sort of cold metallic feeling, right? Very different to glass. Glass is like very thin, very smooth. Um, but metal, this is obviously it's a lot wider. It's going to be very cold. It's not going to feel the same against our lips. If we look at El Dorado, again, now this looks more like wood. So it might almost dry up your lips slightly when you touch your lips to, because it might absorb some of that moisture. It's going to feel a bit of the grain of the woods. You're going to feel more texture on there, right? I really love the idea of Primordial. I want to talk about this drink just a little bit. I think it's really cool. The idea of sipping out of a vessel that is in itself two hands is almost like dipping your hands into a drink and sipping it out of your own hands. And the idea of Primordial is like almost going back to our roots and going back to a more primitive way of man. And that's the message that this drink is trying to tell. And we see that through sound. That's very important. But the texture of it as well is just as important. If you're drinking out of your hands, you have lips against skin. It's going to be very different as opposed to lips against metal. Metal is going to be very cold, very neutral, very. When we think of metal, we think of like logical, scientific. We don't think creative and unique and interesting. But it might almost be a contrast, right? Contrast is a big part of LISTO and a big part of garnishes as well. It's almost talking about this primitive way of man and this primitive way of drinking. But when we think of metal, it's almost this very modern thing. So it's almost clashing in our heads. So again, very cool concept. When we look at El Dorado, we have this very cool carved skull of an animal, right? We're drinking out of that. Again, it's almost this like animalistic vibe of thinking about like drinking out of a skull. It's invoking these very interesting thoughts in our heads, and the wood as well. Again, that texture, it's almost the opposite of primordial, funny enough. We're leading away from that very modern method of glass and metal, and we're going back to these roots of wood, and we're experiencing this drink in a different way. So the texture of your vessel, the texture of your drink, the liquid, what we're presenting on there as well. There are also other ways of experiencing texture and touch on our lips with our drinks. There have been many versions of oils, right, in serves, be it uh, fruit oils from citrus zest or olive oils that have been infused with different flavors, and these play a role in that as well. All right. So touch plays more of a role than we realize, and there's more avenues to show that sense to people than we realize. And it allows us to be very creative with it as well. Finally, we come to taste. And it's funny how I feel like I've always been talking about taste this entire time, but through other senses. And that's kind of the message that we're trying to get across here. Taste is not just taste, it's many other aspects. And it's how can we take these different senses and utilize them and make them work for us and make them unique and interesting, right? When we talk about global platforms like PATRÓN Perfectionist, uh, it is in fact a very competitive space. We have hundreds of people around the world that are all competing to show that their drink is the best. And the only way you're going to be able to do that is manipulating every single one of these tools at your disposal. Leaving any of them on the table is going to set you back. It's going to put you on the back foot. If you ignore any of these, it's an avenue that you've not utilized. And the fact that taste is lost should almost tell you that all of these other examples of taste are so important that this is almost an afterthought, right? This is what we're trying to express when it comes to this idea of building the story with every sort of element in mind. The smells, the sights, the textures, the feels, all of these come into play before we even sip the drink, right? We look at the cocktail, we smell the cocktail, we feel the cocktail before we taste it. And all of these things are building an impression of it, almost a prejudice of the drink before you taste it, right? Talking about taste, talking about your ingredients, how we're pairing them together, how are we serving this drink? Are we wanting an experience around it? Are we wanting food to be a part of the serve? You know, do we want people to have caviar chasers and get this umami, salty, very sort of mineral ocean kind of vibe from it? Are we wanting a very dry, spicy finish from these tagine cucumbers? What kind of avenue are we going down, right? How are we incorporating taste, not just in the drink? Obviously, taste in the drink is very important. You need a good tasting drink, but how are we incorporating taste in our drink in other ways? Are we having a culture, a serve, a ritual around it? Like those floating balloons of aroma, are we serving something on the side and having it as an experience? This can be something as small and simple as a little slice of banana bread, right? Or it can be something more elegant and more refined and a little bit bigger and a little bit more bolder. That's up to you. Cool. Sorry. So, like I said before, use these tools at your disposal and make it fun. I know I've talked about them for probably about half an hour now. Uh, This is a very interesting and honestly a very fun thing to do. Like I said before, we are creatives. We are artists in our own mind, and we are building these beautiful drinks and presenting them as a work of art. And it's almost poetic in the sense that it's a work of art that doesn't last very long in a physical sense, but it lasts forever in the minds and the impressions of the people that enjoy them. I have had bartenders make me great drinks before, but I've forgotten a lot of them. But I haven't forgotten the amazing drinks, the impressive serves, the impressive ideas, the stories behind them, the unique and interesting ways of presenting these things to me, and forcing me to look at my own senses in a different way. That's what I've been left with. And that's our job as bartenders to make these things for our customers and to give them these experiences. And that's what PATRÓN Perfectionists is there to do. So I hope at least partway into this presentation, I've inspired you a little bit about using all of these senses and using all of these tools and all these opportunities to your disposal to make your drinks better. This is a great example of a beautiful drink made by David Van Zyl. Let me just move my face out of the way. So he's a Cape Townian, fellow South African, just like me. He was our finalist at Globals for one of the years of PATRÓN Perfectionists, and this is his drink put together. So, like I said, we have all of the drinks of all of the finalists on our online platforms. They're great avenues to learn how are people creating these flavors, creating these ideas, right? Putting these things together, these different elements, the stories behind them. I encourage you to go have a look at them, try them out if you can. What's beautiful about a lot of these PATRÓN Perfectionist cocktails is a lot of them can be made anywhere in the world. A lot of these ingredients are very easy to find. We've included a lot of the recipes, in fact, all of the recipes for all of the homemade ingredients on the site as well. So I encourage you to try them out because these are drinks that have made the test, they've passed the test, they've made their way through to global finals. This is great examples of the kind of drinks we're looking for, the stories behind them, and how they're made. So I encourage you to have a look at those. Now, I mentioned contrast before. I didn't go too far into it, but contrast is a part of this almost two-part system that we're looking at of harmony and contrast. Are we trying to make the presentation and the garnish around the drink work in tandem with the colors, the flavors, all of those elements, or are we trying to create a contrast, right? It's very obvious looking at these two things that we're talking about. Are we pairing something that almost looks like it belongs and it fits in perfectly into that drink, and it almost hides that inside it, like it's not even a garnish, like it's just a part of that drink, it's just part of the ingredients? Or are we trying to make a splash, make ourselves known, trying to stand out, right? Trying to draw attention. That's another part of it. If we are looking at something that's harmonious and very simple and elegant, it almost fades into the drink and becomes part of it as a whole. This isn't necessarily a bad thing. It blends in and creates this sort of perfect concentric idea, this visual, this story, this art piece. When it comes to contrast, suddenly we have a focal point. We have somewhere we're looking. We're having a point that draws our interest, and we stop there, right? That's a very powerful tool. Where do we want people drinking our drinks to start looking at? Where do we want them to draw their attention to? Are we doing it to something that's on the side of the drink? Are we doing it to something that's in the drink, on top of the drink, around the drink? Is it an aroma? Is it a visual? Is it a texture? Right? This is a way that we can draw people to certain elements of these various senses we've talked about and to start the journey of the cocktail there, right? So this is just another layer of control that we have over the experience that the consumer or the customer is having with our drinks. So I think salt and pepper is something that is so well known in a Paloma. When we think of salt in a Paloma, it's almost like we don't even notice it. It's there. It's part of the ingredient. It's in there. It's part of the drink itself. It's not a focal point. It's not drawing us into it. But there may be other ways that we can do that. A cool idea that was executed with this drink. I'm going to try and move my head across here. There we go. So we've got these Szechuan peppercorns and mulled and sea salt that we've mixed into the soda. So we don't even see the salt or the pepper on the sides of the drink, around the drink, right? It's inside the drink. It's part of the ingredients. It's part of the flavor profile. So what we've done is we've got a bitter grapefruit jelly that we've sort of set into an actual hollowed out half of a grapefruit and cut into a slice. So now when people look at it, they get this nice uniform pink color. We see what appears at first to be a grapefruit wedge. Everything's almost blending in, but then when we get closer, suddenly everything changes a little bit, right? We look at it and we think, that's not a grapefruit. Hold on, what is this? And it creates this idea of inquiry, this idea of this is almost a mystery. This is almost something I have to figure out and solve. This is an idea of harmony, right? We don't think of the salt or the pepper in the drink, but we're being drawn to this unique and different way of serving grapefruit. So this is an idea of how Listo can change someone's experience of a very simple drink, a very classic drink, and also draw their attention to a specific thing in that drink. This is my favorite part, actually, the tasting part of these presentations. Um, if you are fortunate enough to have some Patron tequila in front of you, I implore you to taste along while I talk a little bit about what the tequila is about and what Patron is about and what these three different expressions of tequila mean for us. You know, what purpose do they serve, and how do they work in these beautiful drinks, right? So we have Patron Silva, Patron Reposado, and Patron Añejo. Now, each of these plays a very important role for us as Patron. It also plays a very important role when it comes to cocktails. Why go through the effort of making three different tequilas? And why go through all the effort of making them at all with all the various processes that go into it? There is an amazing video called 60 Hands, One Bottle. I implore everyone watching this video to have a look at that. Even pause this video, go have a look at that. It's like 3 minutes long, but it shows how every element of Patron tequila is made with this idea of passion and love and perfection in mind. Right? Every step that we take, we try and improve it. We try and make it better. We try and perfect every single element of making Patron tequila. From the plants that we're sourcing and how we are breaking them down to the bottles that they go into, every single step of the way. And we want people to take this idea on in their drinks. We want bartenders to think about every single individual step when making their perfectionist cocktail, their perfect cocktail, their unique and interesting portrayal of these ideas and these beautiful tastes and these textures and these aromas and these sights. We want to give you the best foundation to make these drinks. So, of course, we start off with the best tequila. Now, Patron Silva, it's beautiful and bright. It's slightly vegetal. I get a little bit of green peppers in there. There's a little bit of light spice of black pepper. There's these light bitter notes, these very vegetal notes. These are green bananas, uh, freshly cut grass on the aroma. It's this beautiful expression of what tequila is because it brings through all the flavor and all the elements of the agave. Right, that's what we're looking for in an unaged tequila. We want the pure expression of that plant. As we start to age it, obviously this changes. We use 5 different barrels in the breakdown of Patron tequila, in the aging process of Patron tequila. It is 2 types of French oak, French Allier, I think, and French Limousine. I don't think I know. Hungarian oak, American white oak, and the last is a hybrid of French Limousine and American white oak. All of these are there to portray these beautiful blends of flavors. And we see them come out through the taste of Reposado and through the taste of Añejo. We get a lot of citrus notes, a lot of nuts, a lot of spice. We get a lot of fruity notes coming through. The agave is still there, but it's more of a cooked agave, more of a caramelized flavor. We're getting a little bit of the vanilla and the toffee, these sort of fresh, sweet, natural notes coming through from the wood. And natural is a big part of us. There are no additives in Patron tequila. We're not adding anything in there. We're not changing the natural process at all. We're just delivering this pure flavor through all these processes, through the cooking, the milling, fermentation, distillation, and aging. We're taking care of each individual step to make sure we're delivering these beautiful flavors in the most natural way possible. And anejo is a really special product, right? I have a big love for anejo. I have a big love for aged spirits. I have a big love for the story that they tell, and why we age them in the first place. And I think Patron Anejo is taking big steps in changing people's perception of tequila, right? And we're bringing in these sort of musky, oaky, tobacco kind of aromas, these spices, these cinnamons, these dried fruits, apricots, things like that. We're bringing all these together in a tequila to make it this elegant, beautiful sipping experience that works great in cocktails as well. That age softens it, gives it these beautiful, rich flavors. Dried stone fruits, toffees, caramels. We're still preserving a lot of that nuts and citrus and bringing all those to the table as well. We're still keeping that element of agave. So it's this really beautiful expression of an aged spirit that's still, it brings a lot to the table from the wood, but it remembers where it came from. It doesn't forget those flavors. It doesn't forget those notes. It doesn't forget that it is a tequila, and that's what it's about. All right, I'm back. Okay, large scale serves. This plays a role in Listo. Again, when we talk about Listo, we're not just talking about the garnishes. We're talking about the entire theater around serving these drinks, right? So, how can we serve drinks to multiple people at the same time, the same drink, and make it worthwhile, make it pageantry, make it a part of the experience? And when we look at these large scale serves, these punch bowls, I mean, this already is a beautiful expression of that. We've got these uh, shining bright mermaids as the stand for it. We've got this beautiful, almost like frosted glass around it. We've got this deep red of the cocktail with these bright orange, yellow, green, violet colors on top. And it's creating a lot of contrast. We spoke about contrast before. The first thing we look at is that stand, right? We look at these bright, beautiful colors on top, and then this darker reddish color of the cocktail beneath it. And this is already a great example of how we can bring contrast to our drinks and make them more interesting. We've got 4 different kinds of large scale serves. We've got punch bowls, carafes, fountains, and bottle serves. And we'll talk about the experience for each of these as we go, right? So Nomad does these beautiful big serves, right? In these, if we go to the next slide, do we see them? We don't. Right. It's these beautiful big jugs, and you can see there at the bottom. I wish we had more of a view of it, but this beautiful presentation of this crushed ice with these layers of citrus along the side. So Nomad does what they refer to as the cocktail explosions. It's these big, large-scale serves, and we can see there at the bottom this sort of textured glass, this crushed ice, these uh, slices of citrus fruit going down the side. We've got our lemons, we've got our oranges, this element of color, this element of presentation, right? It grabs people's attentions. It makes them want to take photos of them. It you walk past a table, to another table, and go, "What is that? I want to try that out. That's crazy. That's interesting. I want to see what this is about. I want to experience it." And it's about attracting people to that experience and showing it off to them, right? Another great example of that. Oh, we'll get to another great example of that. Sorry, I got a little bit confused with my slides. How big are our bar tables? Right? How are we serving it? Are we doing little cocktail tables? Are they larger scale tables? What is feasible for these? Right? Punch bowls are typically very wide. They scale out sideways, so they're more difficult to serve on smaller tables. How can we apply these large scale serves to the bars that we work in every day, or even at home? When we are hosting guests at home and we want to try this out and serve large scale drinks, it's great for that as well. What is the best way that we can serve these drinks while keeping the space comfortable and welcoming, right? So the Parisian Paloma for 2, very cool example of a drink. Let me move my head out the way. So this is a serve for 2, but it's served in a large sort of like an absinthe fountain, right? I'm sure a lot of us are familiar with the culture of dripping absinthe over sugar into this drink, and it's taking that tradition, that ritual, that kind of little call to action when it comes to absinthe, and turning it into a serve for a tequila cocktail. Obviously, there's absinthe in the drink, so we're paying homage to that traditional sort of serve, but we're taking that Paloma and we're changing it and we're working it around, and we've still got the fleur de sel, so we've got the salt elements in there, we've got the lime, the grapefruit, we're adding cucumber, we're adding absinthe, this anise, this licorice flavor, and we're serving in a different way. So when people drink the serve, they're thinking of this tradition and this style of absinthe and this sort of theater and this kind of serve that is being promoted, but we're taking a different style of drink. This normally served up tall over ice, this very summery, very fresh, refreshing drink, and serving it in a different way and portraying it in a different way to give people a different experience around that drink. Can we lose the garnish? Right? So obviously when we are serving things in a large vessel, the garnish is a part of a whole and complete drink. When we serve a drink, it has everything finished on it. When we're serving these large scale drinks onto a table, it's not a finished drink. People have to serve for themselves. So, how are we incorporating the garnish in there? Suddenly, it's more difficult to use aromatics and things like that because we'd have to sort of hunch over at the side of the table and wait for them to pour their drink and then quickly go, there we go. And then, like, spray a little something on there or do a little zest or something along those lines. So we need to figure out how can we make this completed drink with the consumer at the table doing it themselves. How can we engineer this so it makes it easier for them to have this kind of service? Do we serve it tableside for them? Are they having this experience themselves? Right? So this is a great example of that. This is a bottle service, the mirror margarita, right? It's a margarita that looks like a glass of water. It's perfectly clear. Okay. Um, you've got a perfectly balanced margarita. You've got all the elements of the tequila, the sweet and the sour, but it's been sort of broken down into this clear, crisp, transparent liquid, right? When I think of margaritas, I think of this sort of like cloudy, yellowish green kind of color, right? I think of frosted glasses, I think of salt rims, all these kinds of things. These guys have taken a margarita and moved it to a whole new level, moved it to a whole different level, right? Taking it to a different degree. Now, when I look at this, I'm thinking like martinis, like silky, clean, crisp, beautiful, elegant, that kind of vibe, right? So suddenly we have a whole different take on a margarita. And how will this drink evolve once it's on the table, right? Again, these are an opportunity. How can we have a theater on the table in front of the person drinking this drink, right? So this is just, again, another tool that we can use. Escape the Box is a very cool share that's I, I don't know. I find this so fascinating, so cool. I'm almost speechless for a second. This is a beautiful serve for me. It's a cocktail served out of essentially a wine box, right? Here in South Africa, we call it a papsak. A little bit of um, local knowledge for those of you watching, but it's taking what's normally, cooking wine or something that you keep in the cupboard, and it's generally not very premium, not very elegant, and taking it and changing it and making it very fun and making it very festive and making this beautiful drink with a beautiful spirit and portraying it in a beautiful way, right? We've got the label of the bottle on the front of the box, so it almost looks like a box that a bottle of tequila would come in. I know Patron comes in these beautiful colored boxes, and a lot of the time we do these metal tins and these metal boxes with these beautiful ornate designs in them. And these guys have taken that idea and said, why don't we turn it into a serve? Why don't we take this normally what is this sort of cardboard box filled with this cheap wine and change that mindset, turn it around completely. Take something that's normally not very premium and very sort of quick, run in, grab it, run out, like pour it in your pasta sauce, and turn it into this really cool experience that people can have fun around. And that's an element that we're talking about. The last drink, the Mirror Margaritas, is very smooth, very elegant kind of drink. I feel like I need to drink it while wearing a tuxedo. But this, I feel like I can have fun with a bunch of mates, and I can sit around a table and we can have this amazing cocktail, and we can take this idea, this box wine, and turn it on its head and make it something very festive and very fun, right? So there's so many opportunities, not only to create these stories, but to change people's perceptions and to have these great times with them. And that's a big part of what cocktails are for me. And I don't know if you can tell, I'm very passionate about it, and I love it quite a bit. So, tableside. This is another element of it. We talked a little bit about this earlier with the large scale serves, but are we adding to the drinking experience by being on the side of the table and serving it to somebody? We spoke way back at the beginning of this presentation. I don't know if you can remember, it was about a million years ago, about flambeing, flambeing a meal and doing it tableside. If we do it tableside, if we do it in the kitchen, it's going to taste the same, but we are elevating the experience. We're changing the experience that these people are having. We're changing the story that's being told by doing it in front of them, right? So we've got different ways to go about this. Cocktail trolleys are something that's been used for quite a long time. It also opens up different avenues. You can go to a table and you can build a drink to someone's preference. At table cocktails, bottle pours, discovery. I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself. We'll work into all of this. So Bar Planet, these guys, I don't know if you can see right at the top there, they're sort of pouring this drink right out at the top here, and they're doing this long throw straight into a glass. But this is a classic drink, right? That's being served in a crazy disruptive way. I don't know about you. When I think of people pouring martinis, I see them trying to get as close to the glass as possible. They're trying to like no bubbles, no bruising, keep it soft, keep it clean. But then when we look at this, this is not about keeping things soft. These guys are loud, they're raucous, they're laughing while they're doing this. They're doing this crazy long pour. They're doing it as a team. They're making it this fun, vibrant activity. So they're changing the style of this classic drink. Instead of this being like, you know, uh, your suit and tie, very elegant, very prim and proper, pinkies out. It's t-shirts, cloths over the shoulder, just having a big laugh, having some fun, and that's how we again can change perception of the drinks and change the way people are experiencing these drinks and the environment that they're experiencing them. So tableside, there are a lot of different ways that we can manipulate these, right? So first things first, when we're in the bar, we're very comfortable. We've got our station, we've got everything out in front of us. We're separated from customers. We're in a very controlled environment. Tableside, throw all that out the window. You have to try and bring that environment to the customers, to the people drinking your drinks, and still make it work because you don't want to bring the whole bar station. It's going to be very clunky. You're dragging this whole thing there. You want to be able to do it effortlessly, right? So how are we giving an experience to our guests and telling them the story? How are we doing it in a really smooth, easy to execute way? And then alternative dilutions. This is a great thing as well. Are we shaking the drink there? No. Can we dilute it in a different way? Can we add something else to it? If we don't want it shaken, sure we can stir it, but there's other things we can do. There's other avenues, there's other opportunities, right? And that's what we've been talking about this whole time. Is what is at our disposal? What can we use to make these drinks better and to make these experiences better? So, oh, sorry about that. White noise. This is a very cool drink because it takes an ingredient and it changes it into something that you normally wouldn't think of, right? We spoke about this alternative dilution. I'm going to quickly move my head so that we can see the name of the bar this came from, because I want you guys to go and, oh, my head is in the way. Sorry, technical difficulties. My laptop is very tired. I'm very sorry about this. Oh, we're getting there. Oh, there we go. All right. Oh God, it's back in the middle. What am I doing? I don't know what's going on. I keep saying I hope we edit this out, but every time I say that, I feel like they're not going to edit it out, so I look a bit silly. Let me. There we go. All right. So this is a drink that comes out of Amsterdam. It's very, very cool. Um, I love this drink because it takes an ingredient that, sure, we use it in drinks all the time, but it changes the elements of that drink into something completely different, right? So this blackened banana is it, it's such a cool way of taking an ingredient, morphing it into something else, something that we would normally look at and be like, I don't want to use that. They've taken that, and instead of seeing it as a challenge, they've used it as an opportunity. They said, how does changing this ingredient in this way change the drink, and how can I use that to make it work for me? And they created this blackened banana water, and they've used that as another version of dilution, right? So we're stirring the drink, so we're not diluting too heavily because we've got our dilution already with this blackened banana water, and it's created this really interesting element of finding this dilution, finding this flavor, and incorporating these things in a different way. It's taking an ingredient and turning it into something new that you normally wouldn't use, normally wouldn't have in a drink. That's what I love about it. That's what I think makes it so special. So, what does Steve us with? This leaves us with you. All right, it's your turn. I have rambled on for ages about what Lister means and how it creates these stories and all these different tools that a lot of the time we don't even think of, that can deliver these beautiful experiences and these amazing stories to the people experiencing our drinks. How are you going to do that? How are you going to take those tools and use them to create your own story, to create your next Patron Perfectionist cocktail, right? I and the rest of the ambassador team, the rest of the advocacy team hope that this has changed your mindset around drinks, around the theater of drinks, around the story of drinks. And I hope it's given you inspiration to make drinks that I wouldn't be able to think of beyond my wildest dreams. And I hope that this session has given you the tools to be the next Patron Perfectionist winner. Again, my name is Luke Knox. Thank you very much for listening to me ramble for so long, and I hope that you guys take every success from this. Thank you very much.